Welcome to part two of our special five-part podcast series sponsored by Diligent on compliance professionals adapting to change, industries, regulations, and beyond. In this part two, we consider conflicts of interest at the board of directors level. I know
Hello,
you'll
everyone.
enjoy
This is
it.
Tom Fox back for another episode in our five-part series today. I'm absolutely thrilled to have with me Renee Murphy. First of all, Renee, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Oh, Tom, it's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Whenever you can get two evangelists together, it's going to fly. So, with that, Renee, you have a unique background in compliance, governance, and risk. I was wondering if you'd share with the audience a little bit about your professional background.
Yeah, so if we go back far enough, and I used to say this all the time at the prior job, I was formerly a network engineer, VP of data center operations. I was both an internal and external auditor. And for the last 10 and a half years, I've been the lead analyst at Forrester Research, covering governance, risk, and compliance and the GRC platform market, along with some sustainability frameworks and climate risk analytics. So, yeah, I've spent the last 10 years talking to the Fortune 500 about how we do risk, how we mitigate things, and how we move forward into the brave new world of technology. Because, nothing like technology and compliance, because we haven't had it yet, Tom. We haven't. I can't wait.
So, what's your current role, Renee?
I'm currently chief evangelist of Diligent Software. It's my job to evangelize risk management, and it's my job to evangelize Diligent. It's a wonderful company with a lot of really good software. I say all the time, it's purpose built, but it's platformed. So we've got really deep knowledge. We're a mile wide and 30 feet deep. And so, I'm really excited to be there. After 10 years at Forrester, you can pretty much go anywhere, right? You can go anywhere. And it was clear to me where I was going to go. I was going to go to Diligent. And so I couldn't be happier to be here.
Renee, one of the reasons I'm so excited to visit with you is we're going to take up a topic that we have not really fleshed out at all over this past year of doing podcasts with diligence, which are conflicts of interest at the board level. I was wondering if we might be able to start with you detailing what some of those are.
Yeah, so when you think about conflicts at the board level, you would say, I have two board members who are, in different companies, or a single board member who is on more than one board. I mean, there's one woman I met who told me she was on 32 boards. It's a lot to keep it straight, right? And I thought, well, wait a minute, don't you conflict out on any of that? Because maybe you have, a financial interest in a nonprofit that would compete against something that is a for-profit company where you're sitting on the board of somewhere else. Like, don't huh like how maybe you're sitting on the board here and you're dealing with another company down here, and there's actually a relationship there where money's being transferred. You get what? Like, you can't even have it. Can't even look like that stuff's going on, because once it looks like it's going on, it becomes a question of self-dealing for the whole company, right? Do you have board members who are self-dealing? I'm giving myself the proceeds of the company, because I want them. I mean, there's a hospital in Brooklyn whose CEO, over the course of just 3 years, his salary tripled, and they realized that, oh my gosh, all the money was going toward all the companies that the trustees owned. It was so crooked at the end that the hospital is like, we don't know if we're going to be able to stay open, because these people siphoned all the money out through all this self-dealing at the board level, right? So that stuff goes on, and you really do have to ferret it out. And you ferret it out with, I don't know, is something is and I'm an evangelist of governance, risk, and compliance. And I know compliance seems like it's no fun, but honestly, it really is a good time when you figure out that's what's going on. You're going to stop it, and you're going to try to get back as much money that you can, because you're the auditor and you saved the day. Like, at the end of the day, like, that three lines of defense that really matters, Tom. And even when we're talking at the board level, that stuff can go awry really, really fast. I mean, what if you had a CEO who had more than one company and really can't figure out how to divide his time between any of them, right? That's a real conflict of interest, and it should be for the shareholders of Tesla. You wonder how Elon has time to spend doing space stuff, car stuff, solar stuff, and Twitter stuff. You have to wonder, how does that work? And so, there is a conflict of interest even there, to say you're not really being a fair CEO if you can't spend fair time with all the companies. And so what does that mean to a shareholder? Well, luckily for Mr. Musk, nothing, if you're a Tesla shareholder, right? So
What about some of the other conflicts of interest beyond sitting on multiple boards?
You could have a, self-dealing. Like I said, you could be, saying that we have all kinds of stuff coming into the board, requests for work, how we're going to fund things, where money's going to go. And you could be dealing that to just your own, friends and family members. There was the city of Richmond, Virginia. They had a guy working at the DWP, Department of Water and Power, right? So he's working there, and he's writing the checks for all of the invoices that are coming in. Well, the invoices are coming in and no one's really paying attention to them. They're just kind of paying them until some auditor looks at it and say, hey, how did we mow this patch of lawn 16 times in 4 days? Like, why would we ever do that? And they're like, we wouldn't. What are you talking about? And he's like, we were invoiced to some company called this. And they realize it's just a bunch of LLCs that are owned by his wife. So really what he's doing is just billing the Department of Water and Power, taking the money out of it, sticking it in his wife's account, paying taxes on it, and bam, they're off to the races, to the tune of $602,000. The city has to wipe away almost $250,000 of that. So in my mind, like, that is unbelievable. And it was just too easy to pull off. And then, insider trading is something everybody worries about, right? It's another way to think about how if somebody on the board knows something, and they would use that to trade. And I know people think it hardly ever happens, but come on now. Martha Stewart, Tom. Martha Stewart went to jail for that, right? So insider trading is real. The other thing is CISOs have gone to jail for that, or at least have been, accused of that, to say that they knew that the breach, disclosure was coming, and so they sold their stock before it was, announced. And so thinking that they saved their stock portfolio, but what they didn't, well, they were insider trading because they were making that trade on knowledge that they had that the market didn't have. But the other thing clearly that they didn't understand was it didn't matter. The stock would come back and it would probably be worth more. It's this weird thing that happens with security breaches. I don't know, been tracking it for 10 years. You always end up on the upside. So you just hang on to your stock, wait for that breach notification, and bam, you're going to make more money in the long run. And he just didn't even know that, right? So when I think about like that kind of stuff, and then vendor relationships, right? I cannot, as a board member, I can't steer any work toward the people that I know or the people that I like. I can't do any of that. You really have to put up a wall between, what you're doing and how you do it. And here's what I'm going to say about that. If you had software that could help you facilitate that, right? Keep things secure, keep things divided, make sure everybody understands what they're doing there and why they're there to do it, right? And you have that in that board management software where everybody stays updated, everybody knows what's going on, they have a direct contact to the CEO is telling them what they need to hear, and there's risk management driving all of that as an engine behind it, right? And audit is keeping us all, honest. They're just keeping us honest, right? Because that's what they're there. I don't want to say they're there to enforce my compliance. They're there to keep me honest. I mean to do it the way they want me to do it. So they're just there to keep me honest. And when you look at that and how all that works, you say, well, with all of that is governance, risk, and compliance, right? With all of that, and it starts with board management, we wouldn't run into these problems. We really wouldn't. And just OpenAI all by itself, I mean, the way it was structured, that was a conflict. Like from the very beginning, there was no way that was going to work. It was a 501c3 who promised to do no harm, and then an LLC who was like, let's go do some harm. So what of course there was going to be a horrible conflict there, right? It was built into the way the structure worked. So when you think, like, I go back to thinking like, man, if you just if you just work the way everything is supposed to work, if you look at it the way governance, risk, and compliance is supposed to come together, board management is at the top of that, right? And it is enabled through software just like anything else. And so I just want everyone, like, that's Diligent, right? That's who we are. We're board management. And that's not all we are, right? We're the capital G. Somebody said this to me, you're the giant capital G in governance. And I said, yes, I am, because the G in governance used to mean policy management. I submit, no, it actually means board management, because what is this all about in the end? Communicating to the board our current risk posture so that they can make good decisions. And the faster we can do that, the better off they're going to be.
Renee, what's the role of either a compliance or risk management official in either educating the board on potential conflicts or helping to manage the board in conjunction with a governance software?
So the way I've always seen the board from inside the organization, when I would talk to chief information security officers and folks like that, they would say, who are my third parties other than my vendors, which is a fair ask. Like, who should I throw in this bucket? And every single time I threw in the board. Every time I'm like, the board is a third party to me inside the organization. They're an external third party. They owe me the same precautions anybody else ever took with security, and probably more. And I know that's a burden on the CISO, but that's the way it's going to go, right? So when I look at when I look at that and I say, okay, well, that's how we enable that stuff through software. We enable security. We can treat them like third parties, like they truly are. We can curate the information they see. But as a compliance person, what's my obligation? My obligation is to make sure that the board understands, especially from a compliance perspective, if we have any legal or regulatory risk, right? Because if we're failing all this compliance stuff at the board level, if people are having more than one, if they're sitting on pharma, on a pharma board, but they're also sitting on some nonprofit that lobbies pharma, like, that's a really weird thing. There should be no, it shouldn't even look weird. There should be no inkling that anything's going on. You have to leave one of those boards. That's vetting a third party. That's third, and seriously, and I mean this. Like, I understand they're the board, but you're vetting a third party, and part of vetting that third party is understanding what their conflicts would be. And I'm just going to put it. Shout out to law firms who are incredibly brilliant at managing conflicts. It's their whole game. There's whole matter management systems that help them with that. But unless you have a board with 50,000 people on it, I don't see the point. But yeah, you shout out to law firms, Tom. They're really, really good at that, managing conflicts. Really good at it.
Renee, if you were going to counsel a board, what are maybe one or two of the top couple of things you would tell a board to be cognizant of right now as we move into the end of 2023 and 2024? You mentioned OpenAI, but are there other areas that a board needs? And you obviously mentioned CISO and potential data protection, data privacy. Are any others at top of mind or your mind right now, or is it the traditional risk management areas that you've talked about literally for years?
No, for me, it's ESG. So in my mind, we're all going to be forced to disclose in ESG, right? And so I would tell a board, you need to pick a framework and you need to start disclosing. If you're disclosing for the purposes of your shareholders or the bank, TCFD is your framework. If you're doing it for customers, GRI is your framework. CDP might be a place why you might want to disclose that so you don't have to worry about it over and over again. But I mean, for me, that's the story for the board. ESG isn't going to be mandated by the SEC. I mean, it will eventually one day, but it's not going to be anytime soon. So as long as it's not anytime soon, it doesn't matter. Your bank's going to want that. Your customers are going to ask for that. Your third parties are going to ask for that. So you're going to have no choice but to disclose somewhere. And so I would tell the board, no better time than the present. Let's quit treating it like it's Y2K. I'm pretty old. Tom, let's not treat it like it's Y2K and we're going to do this once and it's going to be over, right? This is more like Sarbanes-Oxley. We're going to do this forever, you guys. Like, let's just start now. Let's figure out what that means to the organization. I'm not asking you to declare net zero tomorrow. I'm not asking you to do any of that. I'm asking you to disclose your carbon so we at least have a baseline. Anyone can do that. And I really hope people start thinking about that, because it's not going to be regulation that's going to drive this. It's going to be tons of outside forces. So I would tell a board, get ahead of it, start disclosing, and just write one of those risks just off. Like, I don't have to worry about, sustainability risk today because, we disclose, we're tracking it, we know our carbon usage, and we're going to work at, driving that down between now and 2050 or something, right? I mean, that's something the board needs to start to decide, or they're not going to be able to get money from banks. I'm just going to put it out there. Like, if you think it's your customers and you're going to be like, no, I can put them off, they'll be fine. Like, my customers don't care. Like, that might be true, but your bank cares. Your bank really cares. Your bank needs to know that, like, you're going to be there to make your payments, right? And you're not going to get any running capital at all if you don't actually disclose this stuff. And that's why I said TCFD will be your friend, because TCFD is the one that they're going to look for to say, you tell us what your carbon is and how you're driving that down, because sustainability is an issue for your longevity. Banks aren't dumb. They're managing long-term risk. So
Renee,
should the board.
unfortunately, we're
Yeah.
near the end of our time on this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you, if our listeners wanted any more information on the topics we've touched on today, what might be the best place for them to go?
Go to www.diligent.com. Come see the website. We just relaunched it a few months back, so come see it. It looks unbelievable. And again, thanks for having me, Tom. I had a really great time.
I hope we can continue this conversation.
Thanks.
This is Tom Fox again. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Compliance Professionals Adapting to Change, Industries, Regulations, and Beyond, a special 5-part podcast series sponsored by Diligent. I hope you'll join us tomorrow, where we take up the topic of the board's role in compliance training and communication.